At 35, Jessica Wilson watched her sister Melissa's face contort with rage as their parents' living room fell silent. The $8 million revelation, a secret Jessica had kept for 3 years, had finally surfaced. "How could you hide this from family?" Melissa screamed, tears streaming down her face. But Jessica just smiled. After decades of being the forgotten daughter, the tables had finally turned, and the family that had always chosen Melissa was about to learn what happens when karma comes full circle. Hey everyone! Before I dive into how my life completely transformed after my family discovered my fortune, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If this story about family betrayal and sweet justice resonates with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to join our community of real-life drama enthusiasts. Trust me, you'll want to stick around to see how my sister's meltdown was just the beginning of this family revenge saga. Growing up in suburban Boston, I always knew I was second best in my parents' eyes. From the moment Melissa was born, just 2 years after me, it was clear she was the golden child. Our childhood home was filled with trophies and photographs celebrating Melissa's achievements, her ballet recitals, soccer championships, and academic awards, while my own accomplishments collected dust in a corner or weren't acknowledged at all. My parents, Robert and Linda Wilson, were respectable middle-class Americans. Dad worked as a bank manager while Mom taught at the local elementary school. We weren't wealthy, but we had enough. The problem wasn't resources, it was attention and affection, both of which seemed exclusively reserved for Melissa. When I earned straight A's in my sophomore year, my parents nodded and quickly changed the subject to Melissa's upcoming dance competition. When I won a state-level essay contest in high school, they missed the ceremony because Melissa had a minor volleyball game. When I got accepted to Boston University with a partial scholarship, they merely said, "That's nice," before excitedly planning Melissa's sweet 16 party. The pattern continued into our adult years. Melissa dropped out of college after 2 years to find herself, a decision my parents fully supported emotionally and financially. They bought her a car to help her get on her feet and paid her rent for a trendy apartment downtown while she dabbled in various careers: retail, restaurant hosting, amateur photography, and yoga instruction. Meanwhile, I worked 2 jobs to put myself through college and graduate school. I stayed in a cramped studio apartment with 3 roommates, ate ramen noodles for dinner more often than not, and spent my weekends studying instead of partying. Yet at family gatherings, all the questions were directed at Melissa, about her latest adventures, her love life, her plans for the future. While I sat silently in the background, my existence barely acknowledged. I remember one Thanksgiving when I announced I'd been promoted to junior account manager at a respected marketing firm. My father simply nodded while my mother said, "That's great, sweetie," before immediately turning to Melissa and asking excitedly about her new boyfriend. Melissa proceeded to dominate the conversation for the next hour with stories about her latest relationship while I silently ate my turkey. Even when I bought my first modest apartment at 28, a significant achievement given the housing market, my parents seemed underwhelmed. "Are you sure that neighborhood is safe?" my mother asked, concern etching her face. 2 months later, when Melissa announced she was moving again, my parents immediately offered to help with the security deposit and first month's rent for an apartment in a building that was way beyond what she could actually afford. Christmas and birthdays were perhaps the most painful illustrations of the disparity. While Melissa received thoughtful, expensive gifts, designer clothes, jewelry, electronics, I typically received generic items, bath sets, candles, or gift cards with significantly lower values. I remember one Christmas when Melissa unwrapped a pair of diamond earrings while I received a $25 gift card to a bookstore. By my early 30s, I had resigned myself to my position in the family hierarchy. I maintained cordial but distant relationships with my parents and sister, calling on holidays and attending obligatory family functions, but otherwise keeping my life separate from theirs. I focused on my career, my friendships, and building a life that didn't revolve around seeking approval I would never receive. Little did they know that while they were dismissing my steady career progression as boring and conventional, I was slowly but surely building something remarkable, something that would eventually shatter the family dynamic they had cultivated for decades. What my family never bothered to notice was that beneath my boring exterior, I was methodically building an empire. After graduating with my MBA, I joined a digital marketing agency where I specialized in e-commerce strategies. While my parents dismissed my career as some computer job, I was developing expertise in an industry on the verge of explosive growth. At 29, I took a calculated risk. Using my savings and a small business loan, I launched my own e-commerce consulting firm, Wilson Digital Solutions. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Online shopping was booming, and traditional retailers were desperately seeking expertise to establish their digital presence. My client list grew rapidly, from local businesses to national brands struggling to navigate the online marketplace. During family dinners, when the conversation inevitably centered around Melissa's latest job change or romantic drama, no one bothered to ask about my business. On the rare occasions when I mentioned a new client or milestone, my mother would smile politely before redirecting the conversation. "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Melissa might be going to Bali next month?" By 31, my company had expanded to a team of 15 employees. We moved from my home office to a sleek downtown space with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. I was working 16-hour days, pouring everything into growing my business while living modestly and reinvesting profits. Meanwhile, Melissa was on her fourth career path in 5 years, this time as a social media influencer focusing on wellness products, many of which our parents purchased to boost her follower count. The true turning point came when a major tech company approached me about acquiring Wilson Digital Solutions. After months of intense negotiations, during which I attended 3 family gatherings where not once did anyone ask how my business was doing, I signed a deal worth $6.5 million. The acquisition included a 2-year contract for me to continue leading the division at a substantial executive salary plus stock options. The night after signing the papers, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at my bank account balance in disbelief. I had gone from a struggling student to a millionaire through my own efforts, without any support or encouragement from my family. I felt a complex mix of pride, vindication, and lingering sadness. Part of me wanted to call my parents immediately, to finally prove my worth. But a deeper part hesitated. Why seek validation from people who had never believed in me? I decided to keep my newfound wealth private. I continued living in my modest apartment and driving my 5-year-old sedan. I invested wisely, continued working hard, and watched my net worth grow to nearly $8 million over the next 3 years. The only visible changes to my lifestyle were subtle: higher quality clothes, better restaurants, and frequent international travel that I casually described to my family as work trips. During this time, Melissa's influencer career fizzled out after several sponsored posts backfired with her small following. My parents once again came to her rescue, helping her launch a small boutique selling overpriced bohemian clothing and home goods. They co-signed the lease on an expensive retail space and invested a significant portion of their retirement savings to purchase inventory. At family gatherings, all conversation revolved around Melissa's entrepreneurial journey and how brave she was for following her passion. No one noticed that I often arrived directly from the airport, having just closed multi-million-dollar deals or spoken at industry conferences. When I mentioned traveling to Tokyo, my father absently asked if it was for that computer job, while my mother immediately pivoted to show everyone photos of the new merchandise in Melissa's store. I continued to attend family events out of a sense of obligation, though each visit left me feeling increasingly disconnected. I built a rich life outside my family, meaningful friendships, philanthropic involvements, even a promising relationship. I created the emotional support system my family had never provided. For the first time, I felt truly content with who I was and what I had accomplished. But fate has a way of revealing what we try to hide. And my carefully constructed separate worlds were about to collide in ways I never could have anticipated. The collision of my 2 worlds began innocently enough. After 3 years of keeping my financial success secret, a minor oversight changed everything. I had recently been featured in Boston Business Journal's 40 Under 40 list, which detailed my company's acquisition and estimated my current net worth at north of $8 million. I hadn't thought much of it. The business publication had a niche readership that certainly didn't include my family. Or so I thought. It turned out that my mother's cousin Barbara, who worked in financial services, regularly read the journal. When she spotted my name and photo alongside the impressive financial details, she immediately called my mother. "Linda, did you know Jessica is apparently worth millions? There's a whole feature about her selling her company for some ridiculous amount. Why haven't you mentioned this?" My mother, genuinely confused, dismissed it as a mistake. "That can't be right. Jessica works at some internet company. She lives in that small apartment and drives an old Toyota." But doubt had been planted. That evening, my parents did something they'd rarely done before. They Googled me. The search results painted a picture of a successful businesswoman with an impressive career trajectory, industry recognition, and yes, a multi-million-dollar acquisition. Article after article confirmed what they had never bothered to notice. Their overlooked daughter had become remarkably successful. The family group chat, which typically focused on Melissa's latest ventures or my parents' activities, suddenly pinged with an unusual message from my mother. "Jessica, we need to talk. Can you come over for dinner tomorrow night? It's important." I arrived at my parents' suburban home the following evening, unaware of the storm brewing. The moment I stepped through the door, I sensed something was different. My father, usually absorbed in the evening news, was pacing in the living room. My mother, typically busy in the kitchen, was sitting stiffly on the couch. Most surprisingly, Melissa was there too, her expression a mixture of disbelief and something darker, something that looked unsettlingly like calculation. "Is it true?" my father asked without preamble. "Is what true?" I replied, genuinely confused. My mother thrust her tablet toward me. On the screen was the Boston Business Journal article, my professional headshot smiling back at me alongside the headline, "From Startup to Multi-Million Exit, How Jessica Wilson Built a Digital Empire." A moment of silence hung in the air as I realized my carefully separated worlds had suddenly, irrevocably collided. "So it's true," my mother said, her voice strangely hollow. "You're some kind of millionaire." "I've done well," I said carefully, uncomfortable with having this conversation I'd avoided for years. "Done well?" Melissa interjected, her voice rising. "You're sitting on $8 million while Mom and Dad have been helping me with rent? While my business has been struggling? While I've been eating ramen 3 nights a week?" The irony of her statement, considering how many years I'd actually eaten ramen while she received financial support, wasn't lost on me, but I held my tongue. "Why would you keep this from us?" my father demanded, his expression wavering between anger and confusion. "We're your family." The question hung in the air, heavy with decades of complicated history. Why hadn't I told them? The answer was sitting right there in their expressions, the shock, the disbelief that I, the overlooked daughter, could achieve something so significant on my own. "I guess it never came up," I replied evenly. "No one ever really asked about my business." My mother's face flushed. "Well, we didn't know it was anything like this." She gestured vaguely toward the tablet. "How long?" Melissa demanded. "How long have you been hiding this?" "The acquisition was 3 years ago," I answered. 3 years. Melissa's voice rose to a shout. "You've been a millionaire for 3 years and you've just been watching me struggle? Watching Mom and Dad dip into their retirement to help with my store. I wasn't aware that your financial situation was my responsibility," I replied, struggling to maintain my composure. What followed was a chaotic eruption of long-suppressed family dynamics. Melissa oscillated between tears and accusations, claiming I had deliberately hidden my success to watch her fail. My mother kept repeating variations of "I just don't understand," while my father demanded to know details of my finances, questions he had never bothered to ask before. As the evening progressed, the true catalyst emerged. Melissa's boutique was failing badly. She had accumulated significant debt, and the store needed an immediate infusion of cash to stay afloat. My parents, having already invested a substantial portion of their savings, couldn't help further without jeopardizing their retirement. And then Melissa said the words that would set everything in motion. Well, now that we know Jessica's been secretly rich this whole time, she can bail out the store. It's the least she could do for family. The entitlement in her tone, the assumption that my hard-earned money was somehow the family's to claim, ignited something in me. Years of being overlooked, undervalued, and dismissed crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. "No," I said quietly. The room fell silent. "What do you mean no?" Melissa asked, genuine shock in her voice. "I mean no, I won't be bailing out your business." And with that simple refusal, everything changed. The catalyst had been activated, and there would be no going back to the way things were before. The silence that followed my refusal was deafening. Melissa's face flushed crimson, her eyes widening with indignation. My father's jaw clenched, and my mother's hand flew to her chest in shock. For perhaps the first time in our family history, I had directly challenged the established order. I had denied Melissa something she wanted. "You can't be serious," Melissa finally sputtered. "You're sitting on millions while your own sister's business is failing? While your parents have drained their retirement account?" I remained calm, though my heart was racing. "Your business is failing because you've mismanaged it, Melissa. Just like you've mismanaged every opportunity you've been given." "Jessica," my mother gasped. "That's a terrible thing to say to your sister." I turned to her, years of repressed feelings rising to the surface. "Is it terrible, Mom? Or is it just the truth that no one in this family has ever been willing to acknowledge?" My father stepped forward, his expression stern. "Now listen here, young lady. We've always supported both our daughters equally." A burst of laughter escaped me before I could stop it. "Equally? Dad, that's delusional. My entire life, I've watched you and Mom give Melissa everything: attention, money, endless chances to fail and be rescued. When was the last time either of you asked about my career? My life? My accomplishments? We've always been proud of you," my mother insisted, though her eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Proud? You didn't even attend my college graduation because Melissa had a cold. You forgot my 30th birthday, but threw Melissa a surprise party for her 28th. You've never once visited my office or asked to see my company website." My father waved his hand dismissively. "You've always been the independent one, Jessica. You never seem to need us the way Melissa does." "I didn't need you because you taught me early on that I couldn't count on you," I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion welling inside me. "So I built my success alone, without your help or encouragement." Melissa, momentarily forgotten in this exchange between our parents and me, suddenly slammed her hand on the coffee table. "This isn't about ancient history. This is about right now. You have money that could save my business and you're refusing because of some childish grudge." I turned to face her directly. "It's not a grudge, Melissa. It's a business decision. Your boutique has a flawed business model, poor location, overpriced merchandise, and you have no retail experience. Investing in it would be throwing good money after bad. How dare you?" Melissa shrieked, tears forming in her eyes. "My business is my dream. Just because you've made money with your boring tech job doesn't mean your way is the only way to be successful." "My boring tech job built an $8 million fortune," I responded evenly. "Your dream has cost our parents their retirement savings. There's a difference." My mother intervened, her voice pleading. "Jessica, please. We're family. Families help each other." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. "When have any of you helped me?" I asked quietly. "When I was working 2 jobs to pay for college. When I was living with roommates at 30 because I was reinvesting everything into my business. When I closed the biggest deal of my career and called to share the news, only to have you rush me off the phone because Melissa had a date." "That's not fair," my father protested, though with less conviction. "What's not fair," I continued, my voice gaining strength, "is that now that I have something you want, suddenly I'm expected to be a devoted daughter and sister. Where was this family loyalty when I needed it?" Melissa's expression shifted from anger to calculation. "So what are you saying? You're going to let my business fail? You're going to punish Mom and Dad financially because you're jealous of me?" And there it was, the familiar narrative that had shaped our family dynamic my entire life. Melissa was always the victim. I was always the problem. "I'm not punishing anyone," I replied. I'm simply not rescuing you. There's a difference. What about Mom and Dad's retirement? Melissa pressed, her tone accusatory. They invested in my store because they believed in me. Are you going to let them suffer? I looked at my parents, seeing the worry etched on their faces. Despite everything, I didn't want them to struggle in their retirement years. But I also recognized the manipulative pattern at play. I'll make you all a deal, I said finally. I won't invest in Melissa's failing boutique. But I will set up a retirement fund for Mom and Dad to replace what they've lost, with one condition. What condition? My father asked warily. That you all acknowledge the truth about our family. About how I've been treated as an afterthought my entire life. About how Melissa has been enabled while I've been ignored. I want honest recognition of the reality I've lived with, not more gaslighting or denial. The room fell silent again. Melissa was the first to respond, her voice trembling with rage. This is emotional blackmail. You're going to make our elderly parents beg for their retirement security? What kind of monster are you? They're both in their early 60s and in perfect health, I replied calmly. And I'm not asking them to beg. I'm asking for honesty. My mother began to cry softly. Jessica, I don't understand why you're being so cruel. We've always loved both our daughters. Loving isn't the same as treating fairly, I responded. And I'm done pretending it is. As the confrontation reached its peak, I realized this moment was transformative. The family dynamic that had shaped my entire life was being forced into the light, examined, and challenged for the first time. The comfortable illusions we'd all lived with, my parents' belief in their own fairness, Melissa's sense of entitlement, my quiet resignation, were crumbling. I should go, I said, rising from my seat. You all have a lot to think about. Call me when you're ready to have an honest conversation. As I walked toward the door, Melissa's voice stopped me. If you walk out now, you're not part of this family anymore. I turned back, meeting her gaze steadily. Melissa, I haven't truly been part of this family for a very long time. The only difference now is that I'm done pretending otherwise. With those words, I walked out, closing the door gently behind me. Wow, can you believe we've reached this turning point in the story? That confrontation was brewing for decades. If you're feeling the tension as much as I am, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. I'd love to know what you would have done in my position. Would you have walked away or given in to family pressure? Let me know in the comments while I take a moment to continue the story of family reckoning and long overdue justice. The weeks following the confrontation were surprisingly quiet. I expected a barrage of calls and texts, angry accusations from Melissa, emotional pleas from my mother, stern demands from my father. Instead, there was silence, broken only by a brief text from my mother 3 days after our showdown. We need time to process everything. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. My company was thriving under the parent corporation, and I was leading negotiations for an exciting new expansion into Asian markets. I scheduled back-to-back meetings, worked late into the evenings, and tried not to dwell on the family explosion. But in quiet moments, during my morning run along the Charles River or late at night as I stared at my bedroom ceiling, the confrontation replayed in my mind. Had I been too harsh? Too unforgiving? Part of me felt guilty for withholding financial help that I could easily provide. Another part, however, recognized that this pattern had continued for decades precisely because I had always accommodated it. 2 weeks after our confrontation, I received an unexpected visitor at my office. My assistant buzzed to inform me that my father was in the reception area, asking to see me. Send him in, I said, my stomach tightening with anxiety. My father entered hesitantly, looking smaller somehow than I remembered. He glanced around my corner office with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furnishings, taking in the environment that represented a part of my life he'd never bothered to know. Nice place, he said awkwardly. Thanks, I replied, gesturing to a chair. Would you like to sit? He nodded, lowering himself into the chair across from my desk. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I've never been to your office before, he finally said, stating the obvious. No, you haven't. He cleared his throat. Jessica, I've been doing a lot of thinking since our conversation. Your mother and I both have. I remained silent, waiting. It's not easy to hear that you failed as a parent, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. My first instinct was to deny everything you said. But then I started really thinking about it. Looking back at how things have been. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I started asking myself some hard questions. Why didn't I know about your company's success? Why was I surprised by that article? And the answer wasn't comfortable. I leaned forward slightly, surprised by his self-reflection. The truth is, he continued, we did favor Melissa. It wasn't intentional at first. She was just louder, more demanding of attention. You were always so self-sufficient, even as a little girl. You never seemed to need us the way she did. I needed you, I said quietly. I just learned early on not to show it. He nodded, pain crossing his features. I see that now. We took your independence for granted. We poured our energy into Melissa because she was always in some crisis or another, and we just assumed you were fine. It was easier that way, if I'm being honest. It's hard to hear that being trouble-free made me less valuable to you, I said. That's not how we saw it, he protested, then sighed. Or maybe it was unconsciously. I don't know anymore. All I know is that when I look back now, I see all the moments we missed with you. All the achievements we didn't properly celebrate. All the support we didn't provide. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them back. Thank you for acknowledging that. Your mother is having a harder time with this, he admitted. She keeps saying she loves both her daughters equally, but she's struggling to confront how that love has been expressed so unequally over the years. And Melissa? I asked. My father's expression darkened. Melissa is not handling this well. She feels betrayed, both by your refusal to help with her business and by this narrative that she's been unfairly favored. In her mind, she's always been the victim. That doesn't surprise me, I said. He hesitated, then asked, is your offer still open? About the retirement fund. Yes, I replied without hesitation. Despite everything, I don't want you and Mom struggling financially in your retirement. But my condition stands. I need acknowledgement of the truth, not just from you, but from Mom and Melissa too. My father nodded slowly. I understand. And for my part, I'm acknowledging it now. I failed you as a father, Jessica. I was unfair, and I'm deeply sorry for that. The simple apology, something I'd never expected to hear, hit me with surprising force. I felt a knot in my chest loosen slightly. Thank you, I said softly. Your mother wants to talk to you too, he continued. She's not quite where I am yet, but she's trying. Would you be willing to have dinner with us this weekend? Just you and us, not Melissa. I considered for a moment, then nodded. Yes, I'd like that. He stood to leave, then paused. One more thing. I saw some articles about your company online. What you've built, it's remarkable, Jessica. Truly remarkable. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner, but I want you to know I'm incredibly proud of you. The words I'd longed to hear for decades brought a fresh wave of emotion. That means a lot, Dad. After he left, I sat at my desk for a long time, processing our conversation. It wasn't complete healing. Decades of family dysfunction couldn't be resolved in a single conversation, but it was a start. A crack in the foundation of our family's unhealthy dynamic. My dinner with my parents that weekend was awkward but productive. My mother fluctuated between tearful apologies and defensive justifications, but she was making an effort. We agreed to start family therapy, a suggestion that would have seemed unthinkable just weeks before. Melissa, however, remained entrenched in her position. She refused to attend therapy sessions and continued to frame the situation as my cruel abandonment of the family in their time of need. When my parents began to set boundaries with her for the first time in her life, refusing to give her more money and suggesting she get a job to support herself while she figured out her next steps, her behavior grew increasingly erratic. Late one night, about a month after our initial confrontation, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Melissa standing there, mascara streaking down her face. They're taking the store, she sobbed, pushing past me into my apartment. The landlord is evicting me for non-payment. Everything I've worked for is gone. I closed the door and turned to face her. I'm sorry to hear that, Melissa. She looked around my apartment with new eyes, taking in the subtle signs of wealth I'd previously downplayed, the original artwork, the designer furniture, the view of the city's skyline. You could have prevented this, she accused, her grief quickly morphing into anger. You and your millions. You could have saved my dream with what amounts to pocket change for you. Your dream wasn't sustainable, I replied calmly. Throwing money at it would have only delayed the inevitable. You don't know that, she shouted. You never even gave me a chance. You've had nothing but chances your entire life, Melissa. More chances than most people get. Her expression hardened. You think you're so much better than me now with your big corporate success. But money doesn't make you a good person. A good sister would have helped, no matter what. A good sister would have supported her siblings' success instead of resenting it, I countered. A good sister wouldn't have taken their parents' retirement savings for a business she wasn't qualified to run. Melissa flinched as if I'd slapped her. You have no idea what it's like to lose everything. Actually, I do, I said quietly. I lost my family support and attention my entire life. I built everything I have from nothing. She shook her head dismissively. It always comes back to your childhood grievances. When are you going to let that go? When you and our parents fully acknowledge it, I replied simply. We stood in tense silence for a moment before Melissa asked, so what happens now? Am I just supposed to be homeless while you live in luxury? You're 33 years old, Melissa. There are plenty of options between homelessness and me bankrolling your life. Get a job. Get a roommate. Downsize your expectations. Do what most adults do. She stared at me as if I were speaking an alien language. The concept of living within her means was genuinely foreign to her, a realization that reinforced my decision not to enable her further. As Melissa left that night, hurling one final accusation that I was destroying the family, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. For the first time, I had stood firm in my truth without wavering or compromising to keep the peace. The aftermath of our family explosion was still unfolding, messy and painful, but also necessary. Old patterns were being disrupted, hard truths acknowledged, new boundaries established. It wasn't the neat resolution of a fairy tale, but it was real, and in its own way, it was progress. Over the next 6 months, our family underwent a transformation more profound than anything I could have imagined. The established dynamics of decades began to shift, painfully at first, then with increasing momentum. My parents committed fully to family therapy. Initially, our sessions were tense and defensive, but gradually, with the therapist's guidance, my parents began to recognize patterns they had never questioned before. They acknowledged how their preferential treatment had shaped both their daughters, making Melissa entitled and dependent while forcing me to become fiercely self-reliant. More importantly, they began to understand the pain their favoritism had caused me. I always thought being the strong one meant you didn't need as much from us, my mother said during one particularly emotional session. I never considered that you became strong because you had no other choice. These revelations weren't easy for any of us. My father struggled with guilt, my mother with denial, and I with the complex process of forgiveness. There were setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But we persevered, committed to building something healthier from the wreckage of our old relationship. True to my word, I established a retirement fund for my parents, restoring what they had lost in Melissa's failed business venture. But our relationship had evolved beyond financial transactions. For the first time in my life, my parents took a genuine interest in my career and accomplishments. My father asked for a proper tour of my office and attended an industry conference where I was a keynote speaker. My mother began sending thoughtful texts asking about my day and remembering important meetings I'd mentioned. Small gestures, perhaps, but revolutionary in the context of our history. Melissa's journey was more turbulent. After her boutique closed, she cycled through stages of anger, blame, and self-pity. She temporarily moved back in with our parents, expecting the same unconditional support she'd always received. Instead, she found our parents implementing new boundaries. "We love you," our father told her, "but we won't enable you anymore. It hasn't served any of us well." Melissa reacted with fury, accusing them of abandoning her in favor of Jessica and her millions. She threatened to cut contact, assuming this would bring them back in line as it had in the past. When they stood firm, she experienced perhaps her first genuine consequence. For 2 months, Melissa refused to speak to any of us. She moved in with a friend and blocked our numbers. My parents struggled with this estrangement, but remained committed to the healthier dynamic we were building. The family therapist helped them process their guilt and resist the urge to capitulate to Melissa's emotional manipulation. Then, unexpectedly, Melissa reached out to me. She asked to meet for coffee, neutral territory. I agreed, curious about what had prompted this olive branch. We met at a quiet cafe near the waterfront. Melissa looked different, her designer clothes replaced with simple jeans and a sweater, her elaborate hairstyle now a practical ponytail. But the most striking change was in her eyes. The entitlement had been replaced by something more complex, more humble. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began after we'd settled with our drinks. "And some therapy of my own." I raised my eyebrows, genuinely surprised. "That's good to hear." She nodded, fingers fidgeting with her napkin. When everything fell apart, my store, my relationship with Mom and Dad, my whole life plan, I was furious with everyone but myself. It was easier to blame you, to blame them, than to look in the mirror. I remained silent, giving her space to continue. "My therapist helped me see some hard truths," she admitted. "About how I've expected the world to accommodate me my entire life. About how I've used emotional manipulation to get what I want. About how entitled I've been." "That couldn't have been easy to recognize," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "It wasn't," she agreed with a mirthless laugh. "It's been hell, actually. But it was also necessary. I've been living in this bubble where everything revolves around me. When that bubble burst, I didn't know who I was anymore." "And now?" I asked. She sighed. "Now I'm trying to figure out who I am without all the safety nets and special treatment. It's terrifying, but also freeing in a way." "Freeing how?" I asked, genuinely curious. "For the first time, I'm taking responsibility for my own choices," she explained. "I got a job as an assistant manager at a retail store. It's not glamorous, but it's steady income. I'm sharing an apartment with 2 roommates to cut costs. I'm learning to live within my means." "That's a big adjustment," I acknowledged. Melissa nodded. "The hardest part has been facing how my behavior affected others, especially you." She met my eyes directly. "I've been jealous of you my whole life, Jessica." "Jealous?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "But you were the golden child. You had everything." "I had attention and gifts and bailouts," she corrected. "You had something much more valuable, self-respect. You built something real through hard work and determination." Deep down, I always knew my achievements were hollow because they came with training wheels and safety nets. Her candor stunned me. This level of self-awareness seemed impossible for the Melissa I'd known my entire life. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she continued. "I haven't earned that yet. And I'm not asking for money. I need to stand on my own 2 feet for once. I just wanted you to know that I'm working on myself, and I recognize how unfairly you were treated by me and by our parents." "Thank you for saying that," I said quietly. "It means a lot." As we finished our coffee and prepared to part ways, Melissa hesitated. Do you think there's any chance we could try to build a real sister relationship someday?" "Not now. I know I have a lot more work to do first." "But eventually?" I considered her question carefully. "I think it's possible," I finally answered. "If we both keep doing the work and maintain honest communication. It won't happen overnight." She nodded, accepting this measured response. "That's fair. And more than I deserve right now." As I watched Melissa walk away, I felt an unexpected lightness. Not forgiveness, exactly, that would take more time, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. The transformation in my family was extending beyond my parents to include the sister who had been the unwitting center of our dysfunctional dynamic. Over the following months, our family continued its collective healing journey. My parents, freed from the exhausting cycle of Melissa's constant crises, discovered new interests and activities together. My father took up photography. My mother joined a book club. They began planning for the retirement they could now afford, discussing travel destinations and hobbies they'd previously put aside. Melissa remained committed to her journey of independence. There were stumbles, moments when old habits resurfaced and she sought bailouts or special treatment. But increasingly, she caught herself and course-corrected. She was promoted at her retail job and enrolled in community college courses in business management, determined to learn the skills she'd previously thought unnecessary. As for me, the validation I'd sought for decades finally arrived, not in the form of dramatic declarations, but in consistent, everyday actions. My parents remembered my birthday without prompting. They asked thoughtful questions about my work. They expressed genuine pride in my accomplishments without immediately pivoting to Melissa. Small things, perhaps, but revolutionary in our family context. The transformation wasn't perfect or complete. Real family healing never is. There were still difficult conversations, painful memories, and occasional backsliding into old patterns. But the fundamental dynamic had shifted. The truth had been acknowledged. Accountability had been accepted. Boundaries had been established and respected. And in that space of honesty and mutual respect, something new began to grow, a family relationship based not on illusion or obligation, but on choice and genuine connection. 3 years after the explosive revelation of my financial success, our family gathered at my parents' home for Thanksgiving, a holiday that had once been an annual exercise in invisibility for me. The atmosphere was markedly different from the tense, Melissa-centric celebrations of the past. My parents had downsized to a comfortable condo after retirement, using the funds I'd established for them, but also contributing from the sale of their former house. They had recently returned from a month-long trip to Europe, something they had always dreamed of but never prioritized when caught in the cycle of Melissa's endless emergencies. Melissa arrived carrying a homemade pie and a bottle of wine she had chosen herself, not the most expensive in the store, but one selected with thoughtful consideration of everyone's tastes. She was now the general manager of the retail store where she had started as an assistant manager 3 years earlier, having worked her way up through consistent performance rather than charm or drama. Most remarkably, she had recently launched a small business again, but this time, it was a modest online shop selling handcrafted jewelry she made in her spare time. She had built it slowly, with her own savings, learning from her past mistakes and taking business classes to understand the fundamentals she had previously ignored. The shop's breaking even now, she told us over dinner, her excitement tempered with realism. I'm reinvesting the profits and growing it gradually alongside my main job. That's the smart approach, my father said approvingly. Sustainable growth. I learned that from watching Jessica, Melissa acknowledged, shooting me a small smile. Slow and steady wins the race. The casual acknowledgement, Melissa citing me as a positive example rather than a rival, still felt novel, though such moments had become more frequent over the past years. After dinner, as we relaxed in the living room with coffee and dessert, my mother raised her cup in an impromptu toast. I want to say something, she began, her voice soft but steady. 3 years ago, our family was broken. We were living with illusions and patterns that hurt all of us, particularly you, Jessica. She met my eyes directly. I'm grateful every day that you had the courage to confront us with the truth, even when it was painful. You gave us the chance to become a real family. Tears pricked my eyes at this validation, so different from the defensive denials of the past. It wasn't easy, my father added. For any of us. But necessary things rarely are. I'm proud of how far we've all come. Melissa set down her dessert plate. I have something to share, she said, a hint of her old dramatic flair returning, though tempered with newfound maturity. I've been saving for the past 3 years, and I finally reached my goal. She turned to our parents. I'm paying back every cent you invested in my failed boutique. My parents began to protest that it wasn't necessary, but Melissa held up her hand. It is necessary for me. I need to make this right, to take full responsibility. I've already transferred the first installment to your account, and I'll continue until it's paid in full. The moment was powerful, Melissa taking ownership not just in words, but in concrete actions. I'm really proud of you, I told her sincerely. She smiled, the genuine smile of someone who had earned her own self-respect rather than borrowed validation from others. That means a lot, coming from you. Later that evening, as we were helping with cleanup, Melissa pulled me aside. Remember that day at the cafe 3 years ago, when I asked if we could ever have a real sister relationship. I nodded. "I think we're building one," she said. "Not perfect, but real. Thank you for giving me that chance." "We're both doing the work," I acknowledged. "That's what matters." As I drove home that night, I reflected on the journey our family had taken. The $8 million revelation that had seemed so catastrophic had ultimately been the catalyst for profound healing. Money, or more accurately, the truth it had forced into the open, had transformed our family's dysfunctional dynamic. My parents now treated both daughters with equal respect and consideration. Melissa had developed independence and accountability, and I had progressed from the forgotten daughter to an equal member of the family, valued not for my financial success, but for who I was. The justice I had unconsciously sought for decades hadn't come in the form of punishment or revenge, but through truth, accountability, and transformation. Karma had indeed come full circle, not as retribution, but as restoration. In the weeks following Thanksgiving, I made a significant decision. The corporate position that had made me wealthy had also consumed much of my life. I had initially thrown myself into work as an escape from family dysfunction. Now, with healthier relationships in place, I wanted more balance. I negotiated a part-time consulting role that would allow me to maintain my expertise and connections while freeing up time for other pursuits. With this new flexibility, I established a foundation focusing on financial education for young women, teaching the independence and business acumen that had transformed my own life. Melissa, continuing her own growth journey, volunteered to help with workshops for the foundation, sharing her hard-earned wisdom about financial responsibility and sustainable business practices. Our collaboration, unthinkable 3 years earlier, became a tangible symbol of our transformed relationship. My parents, freed from the cycle of Melissa's crises and secure in their retirement, discovered new dimensions to their relationship with each other and with both their daughters. Family gatherings became genuine opportunities for connection rather than performances of a dysfunctional dynamic. The $8 million revelation had shattered our family's illusions, forced us to confront painful truths, and ultimately created space for authentic healing. The money itself had never been the true issue. It was merely the catalyst that exposed decades of unhealthy patterns and gave us all the opportunity to choose a different path. As I look back now, I realize that the greatest wealth I've accumulated isn't measured in dollars, but in the authentic relationships we've built from the ashes of our former dysfunctional family. The sister who once resented my existence now celebrates my successes. The parents who once overlooked me now see me clearly. And I, who once defined myself through their neglect, have found freedom in forgiveness and truth. The family that had always chosen Melissa eventually chose honesty, accountability, and healing instead. And in doing so, they chose all of us, a family transformed by the courage to face uncomfortable truths and the commitment to build something better in their place. Wow, what an incredible journey this has been to share with all of you. I hope my family's story of transformation resonates with some of you out there who might be dealing with similar dynamics. If there's one lesson I've learned, it's that sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most healing outcomes. Have you ever experienced a moment of family karma or justice that changed everything? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you in any way, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more real-life family drama and lessons learned. Share this with someone who might need to hear that family dynamics can change, even after decades of dysfunction. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Remember, it's never too late for truth, healing, and transformation in any relationship. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.